Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Luke from Chakra Awakening, where we discuss all things astrology, esotericism, and awakening. And this is a follow-on video again, just from my last video looking at the lunar eclipse in relation to the royals, in particular, Charles and William. So I've had a lot of requests since that video to have a little bit of a deeper look. Even bring up Harry's chart, because obviously Harry being the other son of Charles, we can have a look to his chart to see what's going on for him. And before I get into this video, I just want to say a couple of things at the beginning. If you're offended by the way in which I express myself, then I completely understand, because I'm not the flavor for everyone. If I am not resonating at your vibe, then I don't belong in your tribe. So you have every right to be offended by the way I express myself or what I say. But just know this, I have every right not to give two fucks as well. If you're reading between the lines. So let's just get that out of the way. I don't want no sugarcoat and fluff. And I am going to make fun of people. I am going to make fun of myself. I don't take myself too seriously. I don't take this stuff too seriously. I don't take life too fucking seriously. And I think that's the problem if I look into the world, is everyone's gone serious, especially post-COVID. And now everyone's so sensitive, and you can't say things, you can't have an opinion, you can't, see things a certain way, and everyone's going to take offense, and it's, oh, my feelings have been hurt. It's like, fuck sake. So if I'm not your vibe, I get it, but move on. There is billions of YouTube channels that you can go, and why don't you go and make one yourself? But if I am your vibe, then welcome to the tribe. Now, the point of my last video was to tell you, or to help you see, that when it comes to predictive astrology and looking at themes and cycles and phases and the likelihood of certain events happening, it's more than just looking at what's going on in the cosmic clock at this moment in time. That's just one little element. There has to be some sort of energetic connection for what's happening in the cosmic clock to find its way through the individual. And, I take the belief that it's not happening to us. It's just a clock that's showing us the time that it is. Just like when we look at the clock on the wall, the clock isn't time, it's showing time. It's telling the time. It doesn't represent time. It's just, how do we understand based look at a clock? So I feel that we're on this sort of co-creative evolutionary process of the expression of consciousness and the expansion of what that is, and all of the different infinite ways in which consciousness can express through nature, through characteristics, through personality, through the physical plane. And I feel like there's a huge combination of fate and free will and karma, as well as dharma. And I feel like that when you become more self-aware, you actually then have a choice of how you're going to respond in certain situations. And that's the beauty of astrology, is it allows us to understand the weather, right? No one does anything, like, you're not going to plan a big outdoor picnic for the weekend coming if you know, right, in advance that it's going to be pouring with rain, okay? So therefore, you're going to probably say, hey, maybe this weekend's not a good weekend to do that. And astrology is just the same. If you know in advance you're heading into particular weather or a stormy time or a period of expansion and growth, then you can start with the choices that you make and the free will that you have. You can start to align and move in flow. And also you can best prepare for the types of experiences that you're most likely to go through. And when you look at astrology and we start layering all the different layers, that helps us to paint that story or paint that picture so we can understand like that. So it's not that that's going to happen and it's a definite. It's just like that, well, the weather's there. And how we're responding to those circumstances and what's going on in the world, and our response to what's going on in the world is going to shape our destiny. And we have a lot of free will in that process. When we're unaware and we're unconscious, we tend to have less free will, and we're going to tend to just go through the same sort of processes and challenges and ups and downs and cycles. And when we become more aware, we can enter into a period where it's like, oh, this is familiar, I've been here before. And we can take responsibility and ownership for our part that we're playing in our experience, and we can make a different choice. We can choose a different path. We can choose no response, right? And that's where the work on the spiritual path comes into it. When someone says, oh, you got to do the work, it's not ayahuasca and reading astrology or getting a tarot reading or doing some breath work. That is not the work. The work is making the changes you need to make in relation to your behavior, your actions, the way you see yourself, how you express yourself, your self-image, all of those things. That's the work. And it's evolving and refining that process. And what I believe is, which is my sort of perspective on this whole, what is the point and the purpose of all of this? It's to continue to refine and evolve towards states of higher consciousness. We're moving into higher frequency energy out of the low survival, fight, flight, fornicate, and feed energy, and into, abundance and fulfillment and peace and harmony and joy and happiness and euphoria and love, right? And imagine being able to be residing in those energies, independent of who you are, independent of what you do in the world, independent of who you're with or not with, right? Independent of everything. You can be butt naked in the desert with not a possession in the world, and you're free, liberated, because your state of being is independent of any external circumstances. And if you can work towards that knowledge, that gnosis, you'll find yourself being able to handle what's going on in the world, what's going on around you, challenges and conflict a lot easier. Because it's like, hang on, am I allowing this to be the thing? Is this going to be the thing that spirals me down, or that, that is the reason why I can't be happy and joyful? So, it's an interesting path and process, and I'd be interested to see what you think in relation to what's the point of all this. What are we doing here? You've heard me say before, we're in Earth school, and Earth is an anagram for heart, but the letters are jumbled around. So we're trying to find our way back to the heart. Jumanji, right? How do you exit the game Jumanji? Well, you find the emerald stone, the green stone. Green is the heart chakra. So you find the heart, and you're Jumanji, you're out of the game. Doesn't mean the game stops. It means that you stop playing that game. You're free from it. And everyone else is running around the hamster wheel, the rat race, right? The human race. Where are you racing to? Well, once you find that, you're no longer racing anywhere. You're just able to be more happy, more content, fulfilled. A big, massive shift in personal values that moves away from material things and the need to have or to obsess or to claim or to possess things, and just, peace, free will. So we're going to start looking at Prince Harry's chart. And I'm going to take you through that same process where we're going to build from his natal chart. We're going to look at his progress chart. We're going to look at his solar arc chart. We're going to look at his transit chart. We're going to look at this time period that we're in. One of the best books, and I'll show it up here for you now. One of the best books that I feel has really helped me understand, especially progressions and especially transits, and putting those together to create a space to enable prediction to work, is this book, The Eagle and the Lark, Bernadette Brady. It's a fantastic book on predictive astrology. So I highly recommend this book. There are others, obviously. If you've got, if you know some books, chuck them in the comments, share them around. Let's get it out there. But that book in particular, it's a must book if you're a keen astrologer and you want to learn how to work with progressions, transits, and by extension, solar arcs. So it's a fantastic book. So let's look at Harry's chart. Let's bring it up now. Here's Prince Harry. He's Virgo like me in the 8th house. So 8th house sun people are going to experience a lot of death and rebirth throughout their life, and a transformation of their self-image and the role that they play in life. They're also probably the types of people too that have a lot of drama in their life, and maybe surrounded by death as well, or at least having people come and confide their secrets and their taboos to them as well. So if you're an 8th house sun, you're familiar with other people's darkness. Then random people on the street can just literally come up to you and start pouring out their heart to you. Why? Because there's this unconscious connection that you have with that aspect of reality. The 8th house is all of the things that are hidden and mysterious. They're occulted. They're not the superficial level of society where most people live. It's all of the depth below that. So also by extension, it's mysticism and it's shamanism. And it's also the occult and esotericism. But it's also the taboos in life that we as a society say you shouldn't talk about. So death and taxes are one of those. Sex is another one. It's often called the house of sex, death, and transformation. And amongst other things, it's also the house of other people's resources. And other people is usually those people close to you, sharing the resources. And resources come in all sorts of shapes and forms. It's not just money. Energetic resource. Well, that's what you're doing when you're sharing intimacy with someone. You're sharing resources. Bodily fluids are exchanged. Hence why the 8th house Scorpio themes tend to be associated with that. So Virgo in there, he's got Pluto in Scorpio in the 9th, with Saturn also in Scorpio in the 9th, and he's got a Scorpio midheaven. Pluto, if you'll notice my other videos I've done on Pluto recently, being that generation born in the early 80s are having their Pluto square Pluto moment. So we'll come back to that when we look at the transits, but that's an interesting point of view. Notice here that his Venus is opposite Eris, the goddess of discord. So it's not a huge tight conjunction, but it is a conjunction. An opposition. My bad. An opposition between Venus and that. Now, interesting though. And there's again, I've looked at this from two different perspectives. Traditionally it was thought that the IC in the 4th house was associated to the father image, and that the MC in the 10th house was more the mother image. And then on top of that, we look to the sun as the father image, and also the moon as the mother image for a person. So his two things going on here. His moon is in Taurus, along with his node in his 4th house. And Venus, the ruler of Taurus, opposite the lord or the goddess of discord. And then his 10th house being a Scorpio house. So, mother image, Scorpio has that theme of like death and rebirth associated to it. And the ruler or lord of his 4th house, where his moon energy is, his maternal, his moon, his mother energy is, she's opposite that. So I haven't looked in context to Harry's chart in relation to Diana's chart and her tragic, passing, but that's something you might want to go and do and check out. And again, I'll preface with this is I don't really care too much about the royals. I'm not. There is something on my neck. It's a spider. Oh, it's a hair. Look, here's the thing, right? Just a little side note. If you're bald-headed, this type of little thing, this really can, I don't know how people have long hair. It's, that's obviously one of my partners, but when you're bald-headed and little bits of hair, like, it's like, what is that foreign object? It's like, the other thing about being bald-headed is because you have no hair, you're often knocking your head quite often because you don't have that sort of buffer. And the hair is a sense organ and it can pick up things. With no hair, it's like, boom, you're knocking your head all the time. Anyway, I digress. So Harry's moving now. His house system, I've just left it as Placidus house system at the moment. You can play around with different house systems. Gives him a really big 1st and 7th house, which is really interesting, especially in context with his relationship. So in his perfection year is technically in the 3rd house, even though it's He's in a Pisces perfection year. So in this house system, though, Pisces is ruling his second house, and that brings Jupiter into emphasis in his life at the moment. Jupiter in his 12th house, 12th house endings, undoings, karmic energy, also the unconscious. He's got that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in there, so might be a year where some hidden secrets and things come from the unconscious to the conscious. There could be a lot of conscious shifts for him that may happen this year as well. And I'll look at that as we sort of deep dive into all of these different charts and what's going on. So his first chart, also, you know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this with Prince William, but there is an Arabic lot, right, called the part of death of parents. Prince Harry's is at 2 degrees of Pisces. So death of the parent lot, 2 degrees of Pisces in his first house. So we'll just remember that degree in that image, that sort of alignment, 2 degrees of Pisces, first house, known as the death of parents lot, which is interesting. So if he was having, if Prince Charles is going to croak it, and you know, then there would be some activation of that point within Harry's chart, obviously. So he's secondary progressed like his father. He's in the, well, he's pretty much in the new moon phase. He's out of the balsamic phase now because the new moon is only like 4 degrees away. So his new moon happens on the 29th of July this year, and it happens at 1 degree of Scorpio. Now, the interesting thing about that is that new moon is conjunct his Pluto. So this next phase of Harry's life are going to have a lot of death and rebirth, a lot of change, a lot of big change, especially to his role, his image, his relationships. They're going to go through massive, massive changes. And, you know, Scorpio energy is that whole, you know, endings of cycles and beginnings and new cycles, the death and the rebirth process. So that's an interesting little sort of period of time that he's moving through. So his sun is in conjunction with his natal Pluto, and he's also having a progressed sun Pluto conjunction over the next 2 year sort of 18-month period. So you could say that this is going to be a really pivotal turning point for Harry in relation to his self-image, the role he plays in this world. And because his sun is an 8th house sun in, you know, the house of death, then that could be the theme. And death is not necessarily literal for everyone. Sometimes death is symbolic, right? In other words, something comes to the end. You could call that the end of it, or like a relationship ending. That's the death of the relationship. But then there's the rebirth of you outside of that relationship back as a single person. So, you know, that the death and rebirth are always connected to each other. Something dies so that something else can be reborn. So those themes already, when I looked, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense, right? Especially in relation to the last video I've done. If you're new here and you haven't watched it, just go back into my library and look on the last video. It was, you know, long live the king or not, the lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So that's one thing. Now, what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to show you the Sabian symbol for the first degree Scorpio. And if you've watched my videos, I like using these Sabian symbols. So every single degree of the zodiac, 360 of them, has a particular symbol associated with it. This was really developed by Dane Rudhyar. And there's a guy online called James Burgess, and I'll give him a big shout out. He has a great, I think he's got a great sort of breakdown of the Sabian symbols. I really like his site's really easy to use. So the Sabian symbol for this new moon for Harry is a broken bottle of spilled perfume and nostalgia. The pull of the past is underlined by poignant emotions of what has passed away and is therefore no longer alive except as a memory. Sharing nostalgic memories binds us into community. An almost universal tendency is to conjure up sentimental feelings of the past in moments of nostalgia. In order for us to step forward towards new horizons, necessarily we must surrender our attachments to something we have loved. Yet its perfume lingers on. The sweetest memories outlast any bitter tastes, And we might notice the poignancy that we can only fully appreciate what we have had once it's gone. And the Rodia breakdown is: a delicate bottle of perfume lies broken, releasing its fragrance. In other words, like if you think about that, something's broken, but it's the effect of that breaking that it's like, now I can relate that to my own life, and where things have broken or they've come to the end or things have just no longer worked. And through the process, it can be a difficult process to sort of go through that grief or go through the ending and the relief moving to the other side. But I don't know, for me, every time I've gotten clear of whatever that has been, I've always felt this sense of like fulfillment, to the point of like, you know what, fuck, here I am again. It's like that song, here we are, and here I am again. It's like, here I am again, here I am again. Oh, I lost myself, and now here I am again. And sometimes when we're in situations in life when we can lose ourselves within them, whether it's a work, a family situation, career, right, relationship, we can lose ourselves, and all of a sudden, sometimes whatever that is comes to an end, and we come out the other side, and here I am again. I found myself again. So that gives that sort of broken bottle, but the fragrance that lingers on. It's like, oh, wow. And often too, Harry being a Virgo is all about refinement, taking and extracting what's useful and good and leaving what's not. So that really sort of ties in with that theme. I thought it was really interesting and something that I'd share. But I encourage you to look at your birth chart and look at your sun, moon, and rising degrees, and then go and look up the Sabian symbol. And when you do, if you're at, say, for me, I'm the first degree of Virgo, right? So I'm going to look up the Sabian symbol for the second, right? So it's going to be the second degree, because the first degree of Virgo is actually 0 degrees. So that means that the first degree is actually the second symbol. So hope that makes sense. I'll put a little graph up here for you. So let's go back to his chart, knowing now that he's going through this progressed new moon phase, right? Endings and beginnings. Just like when we have a new moon in the sky, in the new moon phase, you go through a little bit of darkness because there is this no light yet of this new energy that's come through. Very susceptible in that period every month when we go through a new moon. There's about a 3-day period before, day of, and day after that new moon where it's like dark and you just can't see at night. So a new moon phase in your progress chart can be a lot like you go through this darkness. Something's ended, yet something has not yet begun. The best type of symbol that I can think of for that is the caterpillar and the butterfly. There was the caterpillar life, right? Eating leaves, just that's who you were, like caterpillar. And then there's the butterfly that has wings and flies and lands on the flower and drinks its nectar and flutters off to the next one. But in between those two, bang, you have a cocoon. You're neither a butterfly or a caterpillar anymore. You're in that darkness. So that darkness is that phase that Harry's in. So moving on from that, so his progressed Mercury, excuse me while I just gather my thoughts and look at my notes. His progressed Mercury, and the moon, other than the moon, Mercury is going to progress the fastest, is in Scorpio in the ninth house, 9 degrees, but it's almost at the 10th degree, and it brings it now slightly starting to come into conjunction with his natal Saturn. Now, his Mercury is an interesting planet for 2 reasons. Mercury is in Virgo in his 8th house. Mercury is the ruling planet of Virgo, so Mercury is the lord of his sun, his solar energy, his father energy. Mercury is the lord of that. Mercury also rules through Virgo his 8th house cusp. So Mercury is also the lord of his 8th house of death. So Mercury is an interesting planet to look at for Harry when it comes to deaths and rebirths, and also, issues around his roles and his image and things like that, and his father connection. So Mercury now moving not quite into orb of a conjunction with Saturn, but it will over the next year or two be in conjunction with his natal Saturn. Saturn is, it's authority, but it's also death as a theme. His Venus has progressed here into a direct square to not only the cusp of the 8th house, right? Venus, the cusp is squaring the cusp of his 8th house, but it's also Venus is squaring Mercury, the lord of the 8th house, the ruler of his sun. So, and also there could be a change in his perception, right? Mercury, change in the way he thinks in relation to his relationship, and that Venus being at where it is, it's going to activate that opposition in the natal chart. So is Harry going through a death and rebirth of his relationship? That's something that I've sort of discovered through looking at this, that I think it could also be a period of time where it wouldn't surprise me if there's some pretty fundamental changes within the dynamics of his main relationship. So that was an interesting alignment. His he's progressed Mars in the 1st house. So Mars energy, he's had progressed Mars in the 1st house now for a couple of years. Interesting that through this time is where he's been more martial, right? He's been more, conflicting with his actions and stuff, but that's in sextile at the moment to his natal Venus. It's also sesqui square his North Node. So North Node energy is a lot like, fate and destiny for the future. And sometimes there can be issues around what's happening in relation to his future path. The interesting thing about his new moon, it's in conjunct his North Node. So that would suggest that he's going to go through some endings and some letting goes that are in relation to his path here in life. And when you've got a North Node in the 4th house, the 4th house is, it's home and family, right? Which is really important. It's not reputation, which is the 10th house. It's more about, fixed family values and building foundations, but also by extension, it's more about, being okay on your own, being okay with yourself. 4th house, very private area of life. And if you've got a lot of energy in the 4th house, it's like, are you okay when you're on your own? Are you the type of person that needs to be busy and doing things? Are you okay when you're alone? Are you okay when you're home? Are you okay when no one's looking? And what you're trying to do with that North Node in the 4th house is actually just learn self-acceptance, that you're okay. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to succeed to climb the ladder. You don't need to be seen. You need to accept yourself rather than looking to your outer world as a way to accept yourself. You're more turning towards your inner world. The progressed sun in conjunct, right? So this phase of his life is a lot about this death, rebirth, right? This transformation of his image and his power, right? But it's going to revolve around sort of with an inconjunct or a quincunx. It's going to revolve around a lot of letting go of ego, letting go of things in general. He's going to have an exact progression of Saturn onto his midheaven. So that's a really significant progression, because Saturn was at 12 degrees when he was born. Saturn's only progressed now. What's that now? He's, let me see, he is 38. So in 38 days after he was born, Saturn's moved into the 16th degree. So in March next year, Saturn will be in exact conjunction with his midheaven. So even though he was born with Saturn close to a conjunction, when there's an exact alignment from a progressed planet onto a certain point, like a critical point such as the midheaven, you could say that there's going to be the themes of personal authority, maybe a change in direction, maybe a change in his reputation. He may have been called into a position where he's got to shoulder a lot more responsibilities in the public eye as well, or is going to have at least the focus on him. So that's going to be an interesting period of time, but we're really in that, like he's only months, less than a year away from that exact conjunction. So that's an interesting thing. His Jupiter is progressed into an inconjunct with Chiron. So again, that would suggest that perhaps the Jupiterian themes in the 12th house of like big endings, big karmic releasings, big letting goes, or things becoming really conscious for him. He's becoming more aware of some unconscious material, and is causing this sort of shift in his behavior, his actions, his image. The inconjunct Chiron would suggest that there's this release that's going to cause a little bit of a sensitivity and pain. You know, maybe he's going to go through a phase of healing. So again, in connection with Prince Charles's chart and perhaps his mortality that may be in question, as well as the potential that I see that Harry's in a period of time, and this theme is reinforced more and more, where his relationship with Meghan, what's his name? Judd, the astrologer online. What's his name? Steve Judd. Look him up. He's a great guy. He called him he called her the princess of Netflix, or Duchess of Netflix, or something like that. That was fucking funny. But anyway, I don't really have an opinion on Harry and Meghan, and it's a saga. It's a royal saga. If you watch my last video, the royal sagas are just here to give us, to take our attention and to give them relevance. And like I said, from my life, I'm 45 this year. From my earliest memory, there's always been a saga. There's always been something to give them relevance, to give our attention to. That's how they maintain their relevance. So I care not for that at all. So I don't have an opinion on Harry and Meghan. I mean, what I will say is this: she's an actress. She gets paid a lot of money to act. So is there an element of that in relation to their relationship, and especially from what we see in public perspective? You tell me. So I found that interesting. And then we've also got Uranus has moved into an inconjunct to the descendant degree, and that is almost exact now. So again, he's born with Uranus inconjunct the descendant, not close, but a little bit. Same with Saturn trining the descendant, descendant, ascendant, descending, ascending, and then descending, so a descendant. But that's a critical point when it comes to your relationship. And also to remember that his moon is the ruler of Cancer, so his moon rules his relationship. So Uranus moving into a direct hit of that degree of his angle, as well as Saturn moving into a direct hit of his MC, I would say that there's going to be some big changes to his relationship as well as his public image and role. And that can come about because of what's going on in, relation to what's happening with the royals, with Charles's mortality, with his relationship and things like that. So I found that an interesting one to look at also. Now, that's the progress chart. When we look at progressions, they give us these sort of windows, and I'll flash up an image here for you to have a look at. This image helps you understand that what we're doing with progressed energy is we're looking and expanding a time frame and window. So there'll be peaks along that time frame where the energy is heightened, but there's almost like an orb, like a bell curve, right? You think of it like that. And I'll show some images up here now for that. So that's progressions. And that doesn't mean if something's progressing, that's going to happen, by the way. It's just, it's creating this opportunity of this energy to sort of play out and manifest in that way. So we look then to his, his solar arc chart. Okay. And I always, when I look at his progress chart, I'm always starting with the moon phase and its relationship to the progressed sun, like what lunar phase is he in. And then I'm going to look at like that sun energy. Where is his sun? Where it's progressed. And then when I look at progressions, I start with the moon and the sun, and I move out to Mercury, Venus, Mars. And then I'll look at the other progressed planets, but I don't give them much, power, because normally they're in the very similar location they were to birth. So there's not much energy that's going to shift there. When I look at a solar arc chart, just as I do with transits, I always start with Pluto and work back towards the other end. So, and the reason I do that in a solar arc chart is because now we're utilizing the outer planets more so in a solar arc chart. And when they make an arc to a particular point through aspect or conjunction, then I want to know, like, what's that theme? So in this case, he's Pluto. So the process of complete transformation through crisis or death and rebirth. A lot of themes with Pluto have to do with Scorpio, being that it's the co-ruler of that sign, is directly opposite his Chiron. So it's like, oh, that Chiron energy is getting a bit of a hit at the moment. And Pluto is arced in direct opposition. whilst his progressed sun is conjunct Pluto, he's going to have Pluto opposite, like solar arc Pluto in opposition to Chiron. Like that's a big, like as an astrologer, I'm going, okay, this person's going to be going through some pretty intense, heightened emotional phase where his whole roles in relation to who he is and how he plays in the world are going through the change. And it may be that he's confronted with a lot of like, deep emotional energy, because I suspect that any death for Harry that he experiences post Diana is always going to bring the memory of that tragedy for him to come through. And that happened when he was quite young as well. So he's probably got a lot of stored and repressed emotional energy in relation to that. So this Pluto in opposition to Chiron, I found, has really heightened this period of like heightened sensitivity and potential for a lot of pain, but also a lot of healing as well, transformational healing that can happen. Pluto is making a conjunction with Uranus as an arc onto Uranus, so we could expect that perhaps a death rebirth may have the theme of something that's unexpected, that sort of comes out, and that was like, well, quite shocking in nature with that Uranian energy. His progressed Neptune is sesqui-square the sun. Not exact, right? So there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of, what's going on from people looking at him and who he is and, what's he doing sort of energy. There can be a sense of like with that Neptune in the first house as well, is that, his actions might go look a little bit really strange for his character. So it might be through a period of time where it's like, what's going on there? It's a bit hard to sort of pin down, like what is exactly going on for Harry and what's he doing? What choices and actions and behaviors is he making? So it'd be a period, again, if you had Neptune arced into that sort of relationship of like, you know what, maybe it's time for just not maybe doing huge things and waiting for the clarity and the certainty to come through before you make big life-changing decisions. But it also if you look at it in context to everything else that's going on, it could be like another compound to this whole, like, I think that the uncertainty I'm having is caused by the reality that I'm in, and therefore I'm going to be doing this sort of cutting away or dying or being reborn process. His Uranus has arced into direct square to his Venus. So again, secondary progressed Uranus moving into exact quincunx to his descendant, as solar arc Uranus is squaring his natal Venus. So his relationship is going to go through pretty fundamental shift, maybe unexpected. Uranus in the first house, it could be Harry that's sort of getting to that break point and change needs to happen. His Saturn has arced into it in conjunct with his Venus, his moon energy. So again, a quincunx or an inconjunct is always about release, let go. So it's almost like a karmic letting go, pulling away. The moon is the ruler of his seventh house, relationship. So, this is just what's going on for Harry personally. This isn't in relation to what's happening in the eclipse and what's going on in the world or cosmically in the clock above. This is just literally in Harry's chart. So it's a pretty pivotal moment for him. And yes, one could argue that that's because his dad's becoming king. Yeah, okay, but there's more to it than just that story. And I think we'll see that play out over the next 6 to 12 months. So if you're making odds on when, him and Megan making it, like if they make it through this, then they may make it beyond. But if there ever was going to be a shift or a transition within their relationship, we're moving into a pretty prime period or window where that may happen. It may be unexpected. It may be sort of like uncharacteristic. It may be just like, all this compounds for Harry, and he's just like, you know what, I'm done here. I thought maybe he'd married for reputation and for this, the wrong reasons, and now he's having this sort of release of energy to shift him back into you know what really matters at the end of the day. I always say with Taurus energy, it's what really matters, because when we're in the material world, we're in the world of matter. So what matters, right? And the theme and the pattern for Prince Harry is reputation has got to be let go of. That's not where you're going to find your value. It's learning how to come back to the simple things, home and family, what really matters the most. And it may be that it's a lot of pressure with relation to the public, you know, scrutiny that he has faced, whether it's contrived or not. So it's just part of the story, part of the picture. And again, I'll reiterate that, again, I don't really care too much about the royals, but I'm interested in astrology. And this is a fantastic teaching tool to help you understand, like, oh, how do these energies play out and the dynamics of them? So then let's look at final piece of this puzzle, which is the transits. So again, with the transits, when I look at a transit chart, I start with the outers and I move towards the inners. Why? Because the outers are going to help us look at these big themes and phases. And if they're active through degrees, then, you know, are they reinforcing a similar story that's in the progress chart, that's in the solar arc chart? And yeah, I think they are. You've got Pluto in the first house in a sign change into Aquarius, so a big shift of energy, and especially in the way in which Harry goes about things, his, you know, image, the way his persona he projects to the world. And Pluto's retrograde now, squaring exactly his natal Pluto. So that's a huge, like, pivotal turning point. And Pluto themes are often stuff coming from the unconscious to the conscious that create the necessary environment for great change and transformation. I always say to people that if you've got energy of Pluto happening, wherever that's impacting your life, it demands the truth. And the truth is this: how do you really feel? What do you really think? It's that sort of, we normally keep our Pluto truth really hidden and concealed. Sometimes it's completely unconscious. It's just a shift in our desires, our deep primal desires can shift. But if you're having a Pluto sort of moment through your life and you're finding yourself no longer wanting what you've got, no longer trying, and you can't reconcile, you can't shift, you've got to own that truth. In the first house, Pluto, it's like this is personal for him. So owning that truth. But that Pluto transiting, right? And keep your eye on that when it gets to the 18th to the 24th of May, because I'll show you shortly. But, you know, we've got this eclipse that's happening tonight here in Australia, 5th, 6th of May, the lunar eclipse. But then we've got the big T-square between Pluto, Mars, Jupiter, and the South Node, if it's a cross, if you like, grand cross, grand square, that's happening later this month. So real big volatile point. Again, I'd encourage you to go and check out Steve Judd's page, because he's done a lot of videos on that particular alignment. But I share his sentiment. I think we're going to be like, by the end of May, we're going to be all like this. So yeah, you probably, if you want more on my take on that, go back to my Pluto videos a couple of videos ago. And that's called Pluto Things Need to Change, because that's what Pluto brings about. Irrevocable change, death and rebirth, complete transformation. It's the metaphor. Sorry, I've got more hair and nose hairs tickling in my nose. So that's an interesting alignment. Now we look at his Neptune. His Neptune is square his Saturn. So his, you know, responsibilities are being challenged at the moment. It's also, he's moving into his Neptune square Neptune, and Neptune square Neptune happens late 30s, that aspect. And what can mean is that you prior to this point, you were like, this is what I want. And then the Neptune square Neptune comes on and you go, I thought that's what I wanted, and now I have it. I want more, or I don't want that. I'm willing to let go of what I thought I had, because what I was looking for isn't there. And that can be then directed to relationship, to work, to money, to house, to living situation, like all sorts of things. But it can get to this point of like, and you can get a little bit lost through that Neptune square Neptune period, late 30s, early 40s, where you get lost. And what you had, you no longer want. And then you're like, yeah, but I don't know what I want. So it can be a lot of confusion around that period of time. for me, it was also tied into the end or process of my spiritual awakening as well. And a spiritual awakening shifts your motives from physical and material into spiritual, right? Your desires shift from like wanting, prior to this period of time, I wanted abundance and success, and I wanted to be this best pest control company in Australia and win all these awards. And I had I had this whole idea or ideal. And I went through that and I went, I don't need that shit. I really couldn't care. So that's an interesting aspect or alignment that Harry's going through. And you probably are too if you're in that late 30s. 36 to 40 period of time, just depending exactly when you were born. Uranus is coming into a conjunction with his moon. Now, Uranus is progressed into a quincunx to his descendant, while it's now making a transit alignment to his moon, the ruling planet of his descendant. So, change and unpredictability is the key theme of Uranus, and it's almost like change that moves stuck energy. So that Uranus conjunct the sun is really significant, but it's also Uranus conjunct the moon, my mistake, is an interesting, it would be a period of volatile emotions, unstable emotional state. So an unstable emotional state could be triggered by what? Well, it could be ending a relationship, a death of a parent. Interesting that transiting Uranus from home family house is making a trine to his solar energy and almost is going to sit and retrograde on that point. So his sun, his father image from that eighth house of death or irrevocable change. So I found that an interesting alignment. And that's really starting to come into play now because Uranus is moving outside of its shadow. So we're going to have Uranus now moving towards new degrees of the zodiac in Taurus that it hasn't been in for over 80 odd years. So that's an interesting thing to watch. His Saturn, he's having Saturn directly opposite Mercury, right? So Mercury is what? The lord of the eighth house, the ruler of the eighth house, and the ruler of the sun. And Saturn is the planet of death. So, and also it could indicate a changing of his obligations and responsibilities. And he's being challenged on a mental level, and he's having to let go because it's coming across the eighth house. Eighth house is a lot about the death and the death and rebirth theme. Okay, so that's an interesting alignment. Saturn is also trining his natal Pluto. So Saturn, a lord of death, trining the planet of crisis, transformation through crisis. Whilst he's having his progressed new moon at that same point. Now Saturn's going to get to 7 degrees and retrograde back to 1 degree of Pisces and then go back again. So it's going to be this period of time where Saturn is going to be more influenced. There you go. That's what the truck thinks. And Saturn is also not exactly, although it is to the progressed Chiron, Saturn's squaring his natal Chiron. So it's like some theme of Saturn associated with this challenge towards his Chiron energy. So he's going to be probably going through a period of heightened emotions, maybe sensitive, hurt, and pain, that type of thing. His Jupiter, he's going to have Jupiter moving into Taurus and staying in his third house, but Jupiter is really it's trining his Mercury. So this could be some big news for Harry. Definitely be on the watch for big news stories. And it's also, Jupiter is going to be in direct opposition to his natal Pluto. And when we get to the end of this month, between the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, right? I think the actual alignment is around the 18th, 19th, could be the 20th of May. We're going to have Pluto in his first, Mars in his seventh, Jupiter in his third, all opposite and square each other, directly opposite his natal Pluto and his progressed new moon that he's having as well. So huge point. Now, if you layer this from the transits now back, and funnel it through, these transits could be, they align to the same theme that's been building within all these progressed and charts. So it's like, man, I can't see the Royals getting through the end of this month without some huge thing beyond the coronation that's happening on Saturday. I think we're going to be at the end of this month going, holy shit, that happened and then that happened. So it's something to look for. Now, the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse happened at 29 degrees or 0 degrees Taurus. 29 degrees Aries, 0 degrees Taurus. Where was that solar eclipse? Directly opposite his Pluto. You could say that Pluto is holding the reservoir of the unconscious as well, and the deep desire of the soul, and the whole process of the deepest types of change and transformation we go through. And Pluto in Scorpio, it's like the death and the rebirth theme is really emphasized. So that solar eclipse we've had just recently, in direct opposition with Pluto, the lunar eclipse happening tonight, tomorrow, where does that hit? Well, not directly, but by a couple of degrees on his natal Saturn. So Pluto's Saturn themes are really activated in this eclipse phase for Harry. And Pluto's Saturn is like, you can't escape the death and rebirth. What happened in January 13th, 2020? Saturn and Pluto made a conjunction that they make every 40 odd years. They came together in alignment. We remember what happened at the beginning of 2020? I do. Right? What were they? Oh, that was the pandemic or the plandemic, right? So when we're dealing with these energies, we're dealing with those types of themes. And this eclipse series for Harry that we're all having has really activated his Pluto Saturn natally, like in a big way. So coming back to his personal situation with that Mars moving into Leo in his 7th, activating that big T-square or grand cross in his chart, it could be some sort of like shift in his relationship. He may be like that, be the next royal scandal. It's like, oh, we had the coronation of the king, and it might be the fact that it was so like a non-event because they hyped it up to all these things, but people have become awakened and more disengaged with this bullshit, this pomp and ceremony, and this I pledge my allegiance in the street to the king. Like, Charles has never been a well-liked personality. He's just been the mummy's boy sitting in the shadow. And I think we've all, at some level and point in our life, looked and gone, what the hell? Like, he's going to be the king? So, it may be that, yeah, he's the king. And the next thing, there's this big ass scandal, or he dies, or, Harry's now left Meghan. And we're not stuck on the fact that the coronation was a complete flop. We're like, oh, there's that whole misdirection, rabbit in the hat sort of look at this hand while this hand does something. So I'm just going to say that I think that over this next month is going to be pretty wild, but this next 12 to 18 month period, when it comes to Prince Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry in particular, I would say we're going to see some fundamental, irrevocable, life-changing change. And I'd be very surprised if we get to the end of next year and Prince Charles is alive. I think his time is almost up. So this is another look at the using and utilizing all of these charts. It's not just about, looking at what's happening in the sky. It's like looking deeper into this. Now, I want to reiterate this point that what's happening in the sky isn't causing this. It's not because, oh my God, the eclipse did it, or Mercury retrograde is doing it. No, those cycles are tied into how if we were to imagine source or unity consciousness, right? In other words, oneness, right? The plane of infinite possibility, limitless infinite possibility that hasn't yet manifest. And then as source energy manifests down through the different layers of frequencies and energies into the physical plane, it does so through this sort of, excuse me, I haven't got a coke habit. I've got a fucking moustache hair that's tickling my nose. It drives me crazy. It happens every sort of couple of weeks. One will go rogue and be like, hello, hello, and tickle my nose like that. And it's just, so it's time for me to get my little, anyway, those with moustaches out there will most likely lay that. Camilla's probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, you've just degraded someone and you've made someone else bad to make yourself feel good. Yes, I have done that. And it's my channel, and I'll continue to fucking do that because that's my sense of humor. If you don't like it, there's the door. But what was I saying? My point was this. Yeah, so source energy is going to manifest through these different frequencies and layers. And once it gets to the frequency, right, of light, it becomes like, we can perceive it in some way, shape, or form. And then its vibrational frequency is going to go lower and lower and lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And that energy is going to go lower until that energy becomes material and physical. So as it does so, it doesn't just do that through like just, just miraculous. It's doing it through this sort of divine architecture. And astrology helps us look at the different frequencies of this different architecture. So when we understand that we're partaking in this experience of consciousness, we can look at all of the clock and all of the phases and all of the cycles to understand like what sort of energies unfolding here. We are partaking with it. It's not happening or doing it to us. We're in this. Like we're all part of this consciousness. So when you become aware of it, it's like, oh, like I've got the keys. Astrology is known as the golden key. Got the key. I can sort of understand a bit more better now, more beyond just like the story I'm told on the TV about what world's doing and that's the globe and it's all these things. No, I've got a key. I can unlock a little bit more information now and more knowledge. The other key is the tarot. The tarot is the silver key because it unlocks your intuitive connection. Because you can't just have one key, you've got to have two keys, the golden and the silver key. So astrology and the tarot are the keys. The keys to what? Unlocking potential, to understanding reality beyond just what we can perceive with our physical senses. So that's why I do what I do. I love what I do. When you come and get an astrology reading with me, know that before we sit down and have a discussion online, I've done this on your chart. I'm looking at all the different layers. So when I give you an understanding of what the eclipse might mean for you, it's because I've looked at it in context to what's happening on a deeper level. And for some people, the eclipse is going to be like, huh? Was there eclipse? And for other people, it's going to be like, fuck. And how do we understand how that's going to play out individually? We've got to look beyond just the eclipse. We've got to look at what's going on in this person's development and evolutionary soul journey. And like, we're all here. We're all intergalactic star travelers, right? And I feel like we're refining and evolving and changing and becoming, and we're moving towards higher and higher states of being. As a collective, we've been living in some low fucking vibrational frequencies, and one could argue that we've been intentionally kept in these low vibrational frequencies by a system known as the matrix, controlled by perhaps physical entities, perhaps spiritual entities, to keep us enslaved to that, right? And dependent upon it. And it's almost like you're in it. That's the womb. The matrix is another word for the womb. Well, when you birth yourself out of it, and I can tell you now that a shitload of you did through COVID, right? When the baby's born, what's it got to do? It's got to learn how to walk. It's got to learn how to talk. It's got to learn how to live. It's got to learn how to become independent. So the first awakening out of the matrix is into the state of infancy. Now you are consciously aware you're a soul on an evolutionary journey, intergalactic fucking star traveler through lifetimes and lifetimes. Whoa, now I've got to fortify my being beyond the physical with spiritual information and knowledge about myself and my path. Because now you awaken to eternity. You awaken to this gnosis that you've been here before and you're coming again. And now you better not stay stuck in your shitty experience of life, knowing that like you got to evolve and evolve and evolve to higher and higher frequencies. So if there is something going on in your life, some physical reality or experience that you're stuck within, and I just can't, but you have the gnosis, that now you're an awakened soul on this journey and you stay stuck in that, your soul, right, is going to be like, what were you doing? And for a lot of people, all right, if you get stuck now as the earth rapidly starts to evolve and transform, and you're unwilling to let go of the shitty, excuses and experiences and life circumstances you've got because you're afraid, right? You're probably going to be faced with some extreme difficulty to confront and overcome. And it may get to a point where it's like life and death. So once you know, you have to do, right? That's how you become wise. Once you know, you have to do. There is no other way. You do not want to be knowing and stuck in the non-doing, because you'll get fractured and torn between two worlds. And you don't want to be there. And it can be confronting, making big changes and ending things and letting go and evolving. But I can tell you from personal experience, on the other side of every dark day and every dark situation, every ending and every death is light. And it's the rebirth into something new. And I can tell you, on the evolutionary spiritual journey, it's going to be better and better and better and better and better. It just is. I do have my next live course coming up. It's going to be on the 24th of May, and it's going to run for 4 weeks. It's a live course every Wednesday evening on the day of Mercury in the sign of Mercury, Gemini, of learning, and we're tuning into the different energetic centers, base chakra all the way up to the crown chakra. And I'm going to tune you in with meditations and all the different correspondences and get you to work with your chakras so that you can work in balancing and aligning them and overcoming the types of patterns that keep us stuck living out of those energy centers. I'm also going to tie in with astrology, the planetary energy in your birth chart, and how to understand the types of personal blockages that can happen based on what your clock, your cosmic clock says. So there's a lot of diverging and different perspectives when it comes to astrology in the chakra system. So I've sort of sifted through a lot of it and applied and practiced a lot of it myself to come up with what I believe works best and an understanding. And it isn't going to be something that you're going to do in the course and be like, yes, it's something that you're going to learn within the course that you can then take into your own personal life and apply it practically for your own type of transformation. So that's the intent of it. You can find more information on my website, or if you'd like a personal reading, then you can book on my website. I read for people in person on the Gold Coast, Australia, or via Zoom everywhere in the world. I had a lady the other day, she was in Palm Springs, California. Shout out to Amy. Also had another lady in Florida on the East Coast of America. I have clients in the UK. I have clients in Spain and Portugal. I have clients in the Netherlands. I have clients all over the world. So if you can adjust your time zone on my booking schedule and you can book in, and it's going to be Zoom. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is I'm here holding the light, shining light for others, helping them find their light. And astrology is the tool that I use, among other things. So I appreciate your support for my channel and the work I do. I'd love your interaction, your comments. And if you want to, you can share the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, send all the love. Peace out. See you guys real soon. Cheers.